So let's kick off. So today we're going to be doing a session on kids' media worlds right now. So who's presenting today? My name is Maxine Fox and I head up Giraffe Insights. We're a kids, youth and family specialist research agency conducting research both in the UK and across international markets as well. There's two strands to our business. So the first strand is where we conduct bespoke, tailored research to answer individual client needs. So that can be using lots of different approaches across both qualitative and quantitative techniques. So anything from face-to-face interviews and groups, although these have obviously moved online most recently, through to things like online communities and digital ethnography. And then on the quantitative side, conducting, big, large-scale online surveys across multiple markets, but also doing quick turnaround poll results as well. And then the second strand of our business, and we will be including these research pieces in this session today, is our syndicated studies that we run at Giraffe. The first being Little Voices, which I'll tell you more about on the next slide, and also our Kids in the Screen Changing the Channel study. I'll now hand over to Steve.
Hi everyone, my name's Steve Murfitt. I'm the Head of Insight and Measurement at Sky Media. Sky Media is the advertising sales arm of Sky, and in terms of the kids market, we represent the Viacom and CSC children's channels. So Sky Media are actually the largest kids broadcast advertiser in the UK, with the largest share of the market. And we've worked for a long time with Giraffe on several viewing studies in the kids market.
So what will we cover in this session? Well, firstly, we will look at how kids are consuming content. So the different platforms they consume across and the motivations to view as well. And of course, we can't ignore what's been going on most recently. So we will also look at how viewing and content consumption has been affected during this lockdown period. And then finally, we'll move on to look more commercially, actually, what this means for brands, where adverts are resonating most. So in terms of the research that is covered within the presentation today, there are actually 3 studies that we've incorporated. So the first is the Kids in the Screen Changing the Channel study. And this actually speaks to 2,000 kids aged 2 to 12 across 2 periods of the year. And these are the 2 key viewing periods. So it's across the October time and also the Easter time too. And we capture both term time and holiday time, weekday and weekend. And this is really to capture that full picture of video consumption. So no matter where they're viewing, what they're viewing, we ask them to recall this in the moment. The second study which is included is Little Voices. This is slightly different in that this actually is speaking to kids and parents too every other month. And this is through a survey with 550 kids aged 2 to 12. And as I say, it's with their parents too. So here we ask about lots of different themes. So outside of just media, we look at purchasing, aspirations, wish lists, top brands, for instance. And then the final study which we are including is a bespoke piece of research. And Sky has been involved across all 3 of these research pieces, which is why we've brought these together today for this session. And as I say, this last one is a bespoke piece that we've run really recently, only in the last couple of weeks. So it's sort of hot off the press data. And this actually looks at 1,200 parents of children aged 0 to 15 years. And again, specifically focusing on looking at that viewing behaviour and purchasing over these very unusual times. So let's kick off then and take you through some of these insights. So first of all, the point to make is that kids have a really eclectic media mix, and that the content is really their main motivation to view. And what we can see here is that there is a really strong ritual that exists across the day. Now, CATS has been running now for 3 years, so across 6 waves. We'll move on to the last wave in terms of lockdown a little bit later on, but looking at wave 3, 4 and 5, and this hasn't changed across the whole study, you can see that there is this really strong pattern of the way that they view across that day. And unsurprisingly, you can see there that there's peaks in that sort of early morning time, and then when they get home from school in that late afternoon and early evening period, with it obviously then dropping off as they start to go to bed in the evening. And what we can see is that kids view in a multitude of different ways, but with live TV taking up the biggest proportion of their viewing. And alongside live TV, the other primary ways that they view are through online websites, which we know is primarily made up of YouTube, and subscription video on demand platforms, which up until the lockdown period was primarily made up of Netflix for this age of audience.
We are seeing that live TV is still still does take the largest piece of the pie, so to speak. But in terms of the different needs, we're seeing some quite differences across the different platforms. So in terms of favourite shows, in terms of percentages at least, it's quite similar across all three of these platforms. But actually, in terms of the top need state, linear TV is still very much seen as a safe environment, and it's also seen very much as part of the daily routine.
So despite all of these different ways to view and the motivations and the needs and why kids view in these ways, what we see is that the big screen is definitely still the favourite way that they want to view. So no matter what they're viewing, you can see here that actually 3/4 of the occasions recorded within the Kids in the Screen study is done through that big screen device. And this hasn't really changed across the different waves. And what we know is that when we speak to kids about why they view and what's most important for them, actually the top motivation to view is actually their favourite content. We know that kids will go wherever their favourite content is and that they know exactly where to find it. So that comes out top in terms of top reasons for viewing. We can also see, and as Steve mentioned previously, that actually it being embedded as part of their daily routine is also another key motivation as to why they tune in. And we'll come on to this a bit more later, but spending time with family is also important. And we know that parents really value actually having age-appropriate content and feeling as though their kids are viewing in a safe environment.
So what we have seen actually is that in certainly relative to lockdown is we've asked parents how we feel that the screen time will change. And actually it's resoundingly positive. Around half think it will remain the same. Actually, 31% feel it will get better. With only 12% feeling it will get worse. And actually, what we have seen is that people feeling less guilty about screen time for their children during lockdown. So 63% agreeing with that they feel less guilty about screen time for their child. Also, what we're seeing is that screen time is now being seen as actually playing a role in terms of the future education of children as well. So quite positive for screens. In terms of having a very positive effect on kids outside of just purely entertainment.
And so as Steve just touched on there, that sort of lockdown period, we couldn't actually showcase this research without focusing a little bit on what's been going on most recently. And across all of these three studies, the latest waves of Little Voices and Kids in the Screen have been conducted over the lockdown period. And the bespoke piece of research that Sky has commissioned has also been conducted during this period. So we've got some great results that have come through very recently.
So so just to set this up really, so this is some Barb data. So on Barb, what we're able to do is look at the sort of total minutes of viewing to the total TV set. And if we look at kids viewing, across the last few years, we can see that the TV set viewing really went through the roof during the lockdown period. So kids were forced away from school, and obviously spending much more time at home. And it's quite obvious that when they were at home, that some of that time at home was spent watching the TV set. And what we're also seeing is that the TV set is certainly the device of choice when it comes to entertainment. So for both 5 to 9 year olds and the 10 to 15 year olds, watching TV was the top device of choice. For 0 to 4 year olds, actually TV came out very similarly in terms of percentage, but toys here was the highest ranking amongst the really young kids. But nevertheless, across all age groups, TV obviously being seen as an incredibly important device.
And what we can see is that as we've seen just on that previous chart, the role that actually screen time has played over the lockdown period. When we speak to parents about it, with all the best intentions, actually they wanted to very much stick to a normal routine and be quite strict on screen time. But we know then when we speak to the kids themselves and what we can see in some of those previous charts is that actually, they are using screens more. They have used screens more during this time, both for entertainment reasons, but also to support things such as education and learning, for instance. So let's just take ourselves back to one of the first charts we showed you in terms of how kids view content across the day. So this is before lockdown, where we saw that really strong ritualistic behaviour. And what we've actually seen during lockdown is obviously there has been some shifts in this. So not only actually have screens been used more, but what we're seeing is they're used differently across the day. So that early morning peak that we saw previously before kids go off to school has actually shifted slightly later, with many not getting up as early as they did previously. And then what we're seeing is this sort of more consistent viewing across the day. And this is, as we've seen, these screens sort of supporting more as the kids are at home and not in school. And you could even suggest that towards the end of the day, where there obviously isn't such a peak in that late afternoon, early evening period, that they actually start to get a little bit of screen fatigue as they come off into the sort of the end of the day before they then go to bed. So we have seen some real changes in terms of that pattern across the day as everybody's been at home more.
So here we're looking at what we call mutual viewing. So this is viewing that's happening with other people, and we can see that actually kids are watching less on their own. We've got the inner circle, which is May of last year, and then the outer circle, which is May 2020. And what we can see is that kids are much less likely to be watching on their own. They're also less likely to be watching with other kids. But obviously, we are seeing more mutual viewing, i.e., it's not just the kids who are in lockdown, obviously it's the parents too, and we're seeing much more viewing with the parents.
So then thinking about this in terms of viewing together and this viewing mutually with other people, actually this is a need that we've seen really come through quite strongly over the sort of the lockdown period, along with this educational need that has come through as well. And because of this, we've seen some new sort of content winners coming through.
So we had asked people what the uplifts were across all of the different types of viewing. So here you can see we've put on pretty much all of the sort of platforms that kids can potentially watch video on. And the real insight here is that everywhere saw big increases. We asked where they were watching more of their content, and essentially it was across the whole board. From live TV up to at 62%. Right up and through into SVOD at 72%. So very similar levels of uplift throughout all of the platforms. So I think the insight here is just that everywhere saw a massive increase. But what we have seen, again, this is looking at Barb data, but what we've looked at here is specifically the Sky on-demand viewing amongst kids who have Sky. And here we can see that there are really big increases in uplifts in viewing. So obviously, interestingly, Sky On Demand has seen some sort of historical trends upwards. So here we've got from sort of January 2017 onwards, and there has been a steady increase from about 8 minutes a day to about sort of 20 minutes a day. But during lockdown period, we were seeing viewing of over 30 minutes a day, which is unprecedented.
And not only have we seen that sort of increase across sort of TV viewing, but we've also seen subscription video on demand viewing actually see quite a peak over the lockdown period as well. And you can see here the way after wave 5, so in wave 6, actually sort of increases sort of exponentially. Whereas that online video, you can see, actually stays fairly consistent and actually declines slightly. And this has a lot to do with what we spoke about previously in terms of parents feeling like their children can view in a safe environment. And we know that actually more restrictions tend to get put on viewing online, for instance, through sites such as YouTube. And part of the reason for this increase in subscription video on demand has been the very timely introduction of Disney Plus, which I'm sure everybody has heard a lot about. So we've been tracking this, and we can see that through the Little Voices study that at the time and during lockdowns, this was sort of the beginning of lockdown, actually a third of parents had already subscribed to Disney Plus. And that of all those subscription video on demand occasions that were recorded in Kids in the Screen in the latest wave, actually Disney Plus makes up about a quarter of those. So it's been very popular in its release and has really led to that sort of real increase in subscription video on demand. It's definitely been a contributing factor. And trends that we've seen in previous waves of Kids in the Screen and Little Voices have been around educational content. But what we've seen is that during lockdown, this again has really increased and has been exaggerated. And this is because of kids being at home and not being at school, and actually parents using content and screen time to help facilitate some of that learning at home. So whether it be educational content that also has entertainment value to keep them occupied during the day but feel less guilty about it, or whether it's been actual direct sort of educational content that they have been able to subsidise some of that at-home learning with. And because it's becoming more popular, and as I say, it's been exaggerated during lockdown, but we have seen this trend coming through over the course of the last few years. Actually, it's starting to take occasions away from other top content that we're seeing. So on live TV, we know that kids love this sort of cartoon, this animated content, and that preschool's very important as well. But we can see that the kids' learning content is sort of increasing. And that's the same for online viewing as well. So thinking of viewing across sites such as YouTube, we can see that educational content has also been very important. So thinking more commercially then about what this means for brands, actually what we know is although kids are viewing in all of these different ways, actually live TV still remains really key in terms of how brands can most effectively engage and resonate with these younger audiences. So if we look then at commercial time and the proportion of adverts that kids say they recall, so there's a question in Kids in the Screen which asks them about if they recalled any adverts during that viewing occasion. What we can see is that actually live and recorded TV is where they are recalling the greatest proportion of those ads.
And what we're also seeing is that we've asked where they believe they've seen the best adverts, and again, it's really linear TV, which is where kids feel that they've seen the best adverts. And actually, when we look at Sky Homes, those differences are even greater.
So there we've seen that kids see the best adverts on TV. So they've said themselves that's where they see the best adverts, but it's also where we're seeing that they actually recall the most ads too. And we know that parents, as well as kids, and we've seen a lot of that mutual viewing, actually get a lot of their inspiration from TV as well. We also know that during this period, because we haven't been able to go out like we would do normally to the shops and actually view things on the shelf, that sites such as YouTube and that online content provide inspiration for younger audiences in terms of the types of gifts, for instance, they may want to receive. But what's really important here is that we know that the child is actually really important in terms of influencing the parent. So if you can reach and engage with these younger audiences, it's very likely that when they're asking for something, that actually the parents will take notice of that in terms of what they then go on to purchase. So what do we want you to take away with you today? Well, it's really important to keep in mind some of these key themes that have come through from these 3 different studies, but all focusing on these younger audiences. So the first is that there is this very strong ritualistic behaviour that exists across the day where they're consuming content, and that content is really embedded within their daily routine. What we've seen during lockdown is obviously a shift in this in terms of more consistent viewing across the whole of the day. And what we would expect to see is as we start to emerge more from our homes and actually the kids return to school, although there may still be a slight increase in screen time overall, it will revert back to that very strong ritualistic behaviour. And that's important for brands to know in terms of how to most effectively reach and engage. We've also seen these new needs which have come through, which have been the family entertainment and that mutual viewing and viewing together, and also the educational motivation and educational needs. Now, these have both been themes that we've seen prior to lockdown, so it is likely that these will continue to be important in terms of motivations around consuming content for kids. And one thing we know is that when we've spoken to parents and families about this lockdown period, actually one of the positives that has come out of it is that they've been able to spend more time together, and that they would really like to try to continue this even as we start to emerge back to our sort of new sense of normal. And then the final point there is just to say that having tailored communication for younger audiences is really important. And what we've seen there is that although they are viewing in these multitude of ways, and we know that there's different need states and motivations as to why they view across different platforms, ultimately TV and live TV is still where adverts are resonating most and where they're recalling the most ads. So it still needs to be core to any communication that brands are actually considering. So thank you very much. We've obviously only really just sort of touched the surface of all of this research. So if you have any questions at all about what you've seen, please do get in touch with either myself or Steve. We'll be more than happy to answer any questions at all. Thank you.
Thank you very much.